The last today we are going to have a last talk of the way, but don't lost in that because it's a very important topic. That too after COVID, I think we have experienced what is a real disaster is. So I think I'm adding few of the things in what you call COVID related issues too when we talk about the disaster management. So first of all, many times we fail to understand the disaster aspect. So what is a disaster then? A disaster is actually a major reshuffle or major change on a very massive scale. On a very big scale, it happens. It could be either natural, which can happen by nature by itself, or it can be man-made disasters. We may have seen several ones, and it can occur for a short time or it can go for a longer duration. But the problem with the disasters are many because there could be hardships for humans, there could be a material loss, there could be economic article impact, and a lot of environmental hardship where we find it difficult to bear with them and it's really going to affect us. So recently I browsed a few statistics in India. So we got the idea that India as a whole is a vulnerable country to 30 different types of disasters that will definitely affect our economic, social, and human development potential. So much so that there are long term effects on productivity. That is what more important because we are our GDP is going slow, and there are a lot of macroeconomics performance. So this also a lot of things are going to happen. So that is why the topic is so important, where we are going to talk about the disaster and how it's related to our mental health. We know because most of the literature is on what you call social aspect, financial aspects, materialistic aspects, and economic aspects and environmental aspects, but nobody talks much on the mental health aspects and how to manage them. So that's what we'll try to finish in next 1 hour. So we'll start one what you call when you talk about the disaster can occur in various ways. For example, it can be a hurricane, it could be a tornado. A flood situation is very common because recently, a few years back, and even a few months back, where we have observed in nearest place called as Coorg, where we can see the what is the flood devastation. Earthquake is another major issue. Apart from that, explosions, then hazardous material accidents. Sometimes you must have seen the gas leakage and all how it leads to what you call a lot of issues. Even war could be considered as a disaster. We have seen what is happening in recent Russia-Ukraine war. Imagine what are the damages being done. Then a fire or a famine or an epidemic like a corona pandemic. I think that's the best example where how entire our routine has changed. Many people have lost their lives and still people have side effects of corona. Still their bronchi is not right. So a lot of what you call things are happening. So what exactly happens in a disaster? If you look into that, it causes basically a human suffering. It creates collective human need because we need to work together to come out of that. And we require a lot of outside assistance to alleviate. The best example, again, I'm telling from the Russia-Ukraine war. Imagine how it is entire countries being devastated and how many people are suffering there, and it really to rebuild Ukraine country, I think we require a lot of collective human need where a lot of inputs have to go in different ways. So that's the idea about what you call definition or ideas regarding a disaster. So there could be natural disasters. If we go for few of the classifications of disorder, there could be natural disorder where nature gets fury over us and nature can take revenge on us. That's another thing. There could be technological disorders because of the technical issues. The technological disasters can happen. Then disasters of human intention because sometimes because of the human error or human negative intention, there could be disasters. Then interpersonal violence, you must have seen how sometimes violence spreads widespread and so many people are affected. Then there could be sudden traumatic loss because of major issues. So all this will come under what you call traumatic events, which can lead lot of disasters. Now let's get into slowly the statistics on Indian natural disasters, because India is considered as one of the most disaster prone countries in the world. Our land area is 65% vulnerable to earthquakes. Drought condition is around 70%, because if you don't get the rains and all in time, so 70% of the land will be dried up. Then 5% of the land is affected or prone to floods. 8% of the land, especially on the coastal areas, they and nearby ones, are susceptible to cyclones. And major disaster occurs every 2 to 3 years, which can have a lot of damage. And 5 lakhs of people affected annually. And 1 million houses are damaged annually, along with the human, social, and other losses. Then, since we have what you call difficult level of estimation, the loss is as much as 70 million US dollars. So you can count into 70 into 10 into again 80 rupees into that many millions, and imagine the damage which is caused by natural disasters. So that's where the seriousness would be. Then these are the few of the natural disasters quickly on earth. This one, like tornadoes, flood, wildfire. We don't find much there, but earthquake are quite common. Drought is very common. Tsunami we experienced a few years back, and you know what happened in the different regions of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and all. Then landslides, which is happening. Then typhoons in the higher level. All these will have their own impacts on us, mostly on what you call human beings' mental health. So again, this I have already explained about what disasters affecting India, like earthquakes, volcanoes less. Then tsunami, we have experienced cyclone, flood, landslides, bushfire, not in much what, but they're there. Droughts are very common. Major accidents, which you can see railways or this one. Then civil unrest also could be what you call could be one of the issues. Now all this leads to what you call, we have seen, as again I'm telling you, we have seen already a kind of things happening over environmental impacts, social impacts, financial impacts, all other impacts. But what about the mental health impact? Now definitely it affects our mental health. Now when such disasters would happen, it has got direct impact on what you call our mind or our brains, which in turn can affect our quality of life. So one of the major reaction when a disaster happens is the stress. And the stress is not a simple stress, it is called as a traumatic stress. So when the traumatic stress happens, what you call, we have experience of emotions, cognitions, and behavior and physiological experiences where people have seen it or witnessed them, people have experienced them. Then this can block their coping and problem solving abilities. So we go blank. That is the most important thing. When such disasters, major disasters happen, people suddenly go blank. We don't know what to do, because the impact of stress is so much, so that it can affect our thinking process, our emotions, our behavior, even our physiological experience would be affected. So that's the issue with the what you call uh, traumatic stress. But that is one part. Then whenever you call about the survival reactions, because many times people survive from what you call the disasters. So in such cases, what could be what you call the reactions? What are the predictors? So our survival reactions are what you call depends on the characteristics of the disaster, like how the impact was, how the nature was. Then what is the individual characteristics of the person who is suffering from it? Then what are the response, what you call characters, how we cope with them? So this is the interaction between these three aspects, like disaster characteristics, individual characteristics, and what is the response we would give. So we look into one by one. So when you talk about the characteristics of the disasters, so basically we start with the size of a disaster, like its a scope, intensity, and duration. The more of all these things, definitely it has got impact on our mental health. Then the cause, whether it's a natural cause or human error, that is also more important. Then was it expected? Because sometimes we get some warnings from different various weather forecasting or departments, that you have to be very careful, or health department, to give what you call precautions. But sometimes it may not happen just like that. Suddenly disaster might creep in. Then what time it has happened, whether it's a daytime or whether it's a day of week or whether it's a seasonal. So all these are very important while deciding about the characteristics of the disorders. Then looking into this, what you call, what are the what you call impact, the risk factors, who are at more at risk when any disaster happens. So because please think that the reactions would, psychological reactions would begin before the disorder, during the disorder, and after the disorder. So these are the group. There are what you call around 6 groups who are highly vulnerable to the disasters, starting with the first children, because they don't know what to do with when the disaster happens. Then the elderly ones, especially who are what you call unable to manage their routine, what you call the frail elderly, where they find it difficult to manage. People with the serious mental illness, because they don't know what's happening around them. People with the physical disabilities, where they find it difficult to move around when something happens. Then people with the substance dependency or substance abuse, where their what you call psychological condition is very different. Then people living in a poverty, where the poverty can also one of the what you call factor. The people having property can be another risk prone group for disaster issues. So with this, so these are the what you call vulnerable populations. And what can happen if a disaster happens? See, again, my important concept is on what you call the mental health. But in a nutshell, if you're going into this, first is the physical consequences. There's a mass unmasked destruction. There could be injury, and in extreme cases there could be deaths. And you must have seen, you must have witnessed during corona pandemic or during some of the gas leakage and all, how the en masse people will die. But more important for us is the mental health, where because various forms of stress are very common, because again it depends upon the stress tolerance, how the person has taken the disaster into what you call into his psychological levels of consideration. Then research have said that there are more mental health injuries than physical injuries, because physical injuries can be managed through by operations or some kind of surgeries and all. Whereas how to manage the mental health injuries, because where surgeries won't work, because it's more into our cognitions and emotions part, which have to be managed. So now it is said that mental health of a community before disaster will determine how resilient after disaster, how the conditions would be. Then disaster mental services are vital components of planning and response. So that is why whenever a disaster is happened, so definitely, apart from providing materialistic benefits or giving them free houses and all, there is something really wrong with their what you call psychological status or the mental health. So someone maybe in the form of counseling, and because there is a bereavement, there is a loss, there is a grief. So all those things have to be managed with the help of experts or the counselors or behavioral modification experts. So what are the psychological what you call responses, what you call when a disaster happens? So starting with the one cognitive, where in thinking process we are not able to think properly, because there is a lot of distraction, because disaster has happened and you are still not able to bear with that. Then we think about duration, sequence, and distortion, because still many times we don't want to believe that something has gone or somebody has died. So we don't want to believe them. Then there could be declining work performance, because of your mind is not working properly, the work performance may be declined. Then recurrent intrusive recollections, or we call them as a flashback, where you try to remember and again it affects our mind more, and that when the mind is affected, body is also affected. So there could be nightmares where the person is not able to have a sound sleep. So all these things can happen on a cognitive level. On a behavioral level, the person might be what you call attaching to someone all the time, especially in the children it's very common, or the person might isolate with others. So there could be a separation, or person what you call maybe what you call want to have a loneliness. So that can also happen. There are some people who are thrill seeking behaviors, They want to take a risk and they want to get into such things which is not expected. There is a reenactment of the trauma many times on a behavioral level. And because of these things happen, there could be increased substance abuse. People who may get into more of alcohol consumption or more of other drugs, where they might find some temporary relief. But again, that's again, as I said, it is just a temporary relief. It's not going to be a permanent relief, but it is going to affect much more negatively than positively. Then hypervigilance for even small things. The people will be extra careful in their behavioral action because of the disaster. So hypervigilance. Then elevated startle reflex. For small things, they may be distracted and they will be hyperactive. All these things can happen on a behavioral level. Then on the next level, we talk about the physical level, where there could be shock symptoms, where the person may suffer from that. There could be loss of sleep called as insomnia can happen. The person may not feel what you call hungry because of thinking on these aspects. So it may lead to loss of appetite. Then varieties of headaches like simple headache or tension headaches. There could be muscle weakness because the person might find energy less because of these things. And there could be elevated vital signs where when I talk about vital signs, heart rate or BP or respiratory rate, all this could be, there could be manipulations or variations in that, which is again not good for normal human health. So this is where we are going to talk about the physical issues. Then affective, how it affects our mood. That is also more important. So the typical reactions so far recorded by research are people usually suffer from depression. So when people start suffering from depression, you know the condition, and there could be anxiety. So there's a lot of difference between depression and anxiety, where in depression, the person completely will be withdrawing. And in extreme cases, severe depression, there could be suicidal ideation and there could be attempts to commit suicide also. There could be anxiety where apprehension of the threat. This is what happened exactly during our corona pandemic. So when they talked about the first wave, how we reacted, then they said second wave, then they said third wave. Every time anxiety will be increasing, that what happens, because many people have developed death anxiety too. So that's another problem. And now again they are warning us, okay, where there could be a fourth wave of corona. So be careful. So indirectly, a kind of anxiety would come because we have experienced corona pandemic since the last 2 years, and we have seen what all happened in our lives, how much our life is disrupted, how many of your routine is being changed. All that can have its own influence. Then the numbness, person might freeze at one place and he may not do anything. Then constricted affect, where the person is not able to think much. There could be guilt, shame, and fear because we could not do something, because there could be guilt that you could have helped because we may not. Then there could be shame can happen. There could be fear response also, where all the time we are what you call we say when there's a fear could be of what happens next, because when we talk about corona, there could be variants, and so many what you call variants have entered. And looking at the China's what you call statistics, where lakhs and lakhs of people are dying and lakhs of people are affected. Now definitely it what you call puts us into fear psychosis. Then intolerance of fear response also can happen, where you don't want to accept, but the people will not tolerate that. Then global pessimism, because if you see what you call worldometer, and if you see the global pessimism, where people have got a more of a negative attitude towards the disasters than the positive attitude how to correct over them. So when there's a global pessimism what you call prevails, that can also affect our mood. So all these things. So one of the what you call major issue is the grief, because usually when we lose something, apart from crying, a grief can occur in us. That's another mental health concept, where it's basically a typical reaction to the loss of something, some object or some individual or some major point. And it plays an important role for understanding of the trauma, because the trauma has happened and you have to manage it. but it's an kind of overwhelming emotion, because again, you sometimes we react much more than what is expected. That's why we call overwhelming emotion. And there's a variation among children in giving reaction to the grief. Then some people already have problems, and when disaster strikes, the problems will be what you call exaggerated, and there'll be more problems. So how to manage this grief? So where Kubler-Ross, where he said he gave 5 stages of grief. So the first stage itself is the denial phase, because we don't want to accept something has happened, we have lost something. The first thing is the denial of reality, that it is not happening to me. But how long you can keep this? Then that brings anger in us. That is the most what you call thing, where since something you have lost, and it brings the anger, and that leads to bargaining to manage things, and which in turn leads to depression. So as the time crosses, ultimately you have to accept the reality. So this is where in 5 stages, what you call the Kubler-Ross explains the 5 stages of grief, starting from denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Then when any disaster happens, how the stress would be. So when you talk about the stress part, remember it can what you call happen in 4 phases. So one is acute phase, another one is the retention phase, third one is a repair phase, because we have to repair, and reorientation, getting back. So when you talk about acute phase, what you call, it is very sudden. So we'll look into that. It can last for minutes, hours, or days, because it's very severe. The people either have a reaction of either fight or flight reaction, in the sense either they will face the situation or they will escape from the situation. So the reaction would be fight or flight mode of response. Either you have to face or you have to vacate. So one of the and you have to prepare for the physical activity. Then suddenly what happens? Our narrowing of focus happens. There's a decreases in the ability of our thinking. That's what we say. During a disaster, we are not able to think much. Why? Because the impact of disaster still on our it narrows down our thinking part. Then it definitely what you call leads to some kind of reactions, emotional reactions. One thing is a disbelief, or it's also called as consternation, and a lack of detachment, that you are detached. Because of this, there could be a rigid behavior, like people might get irritable in no time, they might get angry, person might get into aggressive nature, there could be violence involved, person may be sad, may be crying, which all affects the communication aspect, because you are not able to communicate properly what is being happening to you or to the community which where the disaster has happened. But remember, when acute phase is going for a longer time, definitely immediate attention is required, or there could be more reactions, negative reactions to disaster, which can happen in what you call acute phase. Then there is a reaction phase, where it can last from 1 to 6 weeks, because now the disaster has happened, and now how the reactions would be. So for example, now we call it as a delayed reactions. Now earlier you experienced that what you call denied feelings and all. Now you start slowly accepting it. Yes, something has happened and I have to accept it. So that's why it's a reaction phase. Then the psychological idea would be it makes you powerless, because everything is lost, or most of the property or other things, or individual, both animate or inanimate objects you are lost. It might bring a lot of powerlessness in you. Then many people, they don't want to go back to the place where the site of the event has happened, because they don't want to see the place back again. They might get a nightmares. That also can happen. As we discussed already, there could be anxiety, restlessness, and insomnia. There could be muscle tension. There could be shaking and tremor, or there could be a lot of other responses. Irritability is quite common during this time. Isolation or loneliness is common. Then there will be a lot of disturbing thoughts about survival, whether I survive or not, and thinking about the relief, guilt and grief. All it will happen within the reaction phase called within that the time duration between 1 to 6 weeks. Then comes the repair phase where one person has to be what you call get back slowly to start getting back to what you call the normalcy, where it can what you call extend up to 6 months. From 1 to 6 months it can extend up to. Now the reactions will be less intense and not so overwhelming. Slowly the person is getting back, but now there's still that pain is there, that feeling is there, that sentiment is there, but person is trying to what you call have a control over it. Then slowly the interest will come back where the person has lost interest earlier. Then now the person thinks that what best can be made for the future. So this is where the repair phase would be. Then the next phase would be reorientation, because now it is like the stress reaction where the person wants to get back completely to the normal level, where it can take 6 months or up to 1 year can happen. Now all the stress reactions will reduce because you can't do anything about it. You have to accept with this. Then grief, whichever the what you call sadness which you had because of the loss of things, may not be resolved, but the person is want to accept it and go ahead with this. Whatever the reactions which have been discussed in the reaction part will slowly disappear. Now what to do next or assessing ongoing needs is important at this phase, because the person now tries to what you call get back to the normal condition so that he can live better. Now I've just highlighted few of the stress reactions where we call it as a PTSR or post-traumatic stress reactions. So what they do is basically they avoid thinking of the trauma. They don't want to think about what has happened. Then they avoid talking about it. Then for even for small things, they'll get frightened. There could be negative mood. There could be negative thinking. Hypervigilance, always on the guard. Then avoiding places as I discussed. They don't even suppose if something has happened in the flight, they don't even want to go again in the flight again. Nightmares or flashbacks, inability to concentrate, all this aggressive behavior, all that loss of interest, sleeping difficulty, all this we are listed, bad dreams, all these things can have what you call reactions after the disaster can happen. Then based on that, now we slowly move on to the psychological reactions to disasters. For example, in the first phase, the threat part and the warning part and the impact. So what is going to happen in the threat part, where the person thinks that is going to have a lot of impact on him? It gives a warning and it has got its own impact, where the reactions would begin in the first phase. So in the next phase, where the person can what you call can be heroic, he may be on a honeymoon, because what is the meaning of honeymoon here is it is basically getting help from volunteers and government. Then short-lived sense of optimism by survivors and government assistance would come. So and there are volunteers to help people. So that's the idea. Don't consider honeymoon in other way. Then inventory, where disaster resources are limited and physical and emotional exhausted and discouraged. Now what happens, those who have survived, now they will have what you call a lot of post-traumatic issues. They are physically and emotionally exhausted and discouraged too. So if you see the phases of emotional response, see the pre-disaster, if you see there is a worrying and a threat, the impact, some people will become okay, want to work with them. See the emotional highs, if you see the left side, this one, and a community cohesion where people try to what you call work together with the help of government and other assistance and NGOs, and then there could be some disillusionment. What is expected from others is not coming. That might trigger events. All this can happen up to 1 year, but after 1 year there is a complete reconstruction or a new beginning. There could be sometimes there could be what you call in between setbacks where person might be thinking back that's not nothing is happening, but again he'll try to revert to this one so that the person can what you call get back to his normalcy at this position. Then there could be resistance, resilience, and recovery. So the resistance means you try to go against where you don't want to what you call escape away, but you want to face it like a defend against the manifestation of distress, impairment, and dysfunction. So that's why you see down but not out. This is a typical statement in resistance. Yes, we have suffered, but we are not going to let it go. So that's the idea in resistance. Then there could be resilience, where rebounding rapidly and effectively from psychological distress, where the person has what you call suffering, but he can rebound or he can come back. And once there is a resistance and resilience, the person have a recovery. That's the idea where a person can regain the ability to function, adjust adaptively in wake of distress, impairment, or dysfunction. So this is where the recovery part can begin, so that the person gets into normality. Now, suppose a person is under disaster issues, how to manage? So that's what we call coping skills. So when you talk about the coping skills, the first thing is ability to orient oneself rapidly. So understand what is happening. That is more important. And what best I can do. That's the orientation. So ability to orient oneself rapidly should be done very quick. That is a healthy coping skills. Next, what to do next? Planning and execution of decisive action. Now you are oriented, you have decided what to do. So automatically you plan it and execute it so that one can plan it easier. Then since there is a disaster, whether psychological disaster or this one, there are resources available. How we are going to use appropriately also contributes to healthy coping skills. Then what happens next? That is the uncertainty without resorting to impulsive actions, because already government of India and government of Karnataka already article given a warning or precaution that children or students going to schools and the teachers are to compulsorily wear what you call the masks. Now this might bring some kind of negativity because there is uncertainty that fourth wave may come or may not come, but there's uncertainty. So one has to tolerate that. Yes, that's more important. Then how you express the painful emotions also important, because you know that disaster has happened. Now it has to be managed. That is more important. That is what you call all comes under healthy coping skills. But when it comes to unhealthy coping skills, the first itself is excessive denial and avoidance. So when you talk about excessive denial and avoidance, that means what? The person doesn't want to accept that what has happened to him, or the person might avoid. So by doing this, you are increasing the stress rather than decreasing the stress. Then overreactive, like impulsive behavior, where by impulsive behavior you may hurt others or you may get hurt by you may hurt others or you may get hurt by others too. So both things can happen by your impulsive behavior, which is not required at that moment. Then over dependence, because of the fear psychosis which the person is facing, might lead to depending on others, and others may not like it because you are like clinging on to them. So that clingingness may lead to over dependence. Once there is a over dependence, it is considered as unhealthy coping skills, because you are not able to make a decision by yourself and live by yourself. You are not able to make an independent decision so that you can survive better. Then inability to evoke caring feelings from others. Because of your what you call way of reaction, way you have behaved, people may not give much of caring feelings to you because of your behavior, because of your aggressiveness. So when you think that others are not caring, that means it's an unhealthy coping skills, because that also brings a lot of negativity. Then emotional suppression, because we say the emotional suppression is very negative thing in life, because more emotional expression when the person has, it might induces psychosomatic disorders. So that is why we say express yourself, good or bad. You need to talk to someone, express yourself. The moment you express something which is hitting which is eating your mind, which is hitting you, the moment you discuss with others, so automatically it brings a lot of relief. But if you don't do that, then it becomes unhealthy coping skills. Then because to forget what has happened or what is the impact of the disaster, many people get into substance abuse in different forms. It could be on a simple level, smoking and drinking, or on a different on a higher level, it could be drug consumption. All this again, but a problem is not solved. That's the important issue here. So all these issues will lead to unhealthy coping skills, and it might aggravate the stress in the person more rather than a reduction. So that is why whenever there's a disaster happens, please use the healthy coping skills rather than unhealthy coping skills, because unhealthy coping skills will put you in much more what you call threat than coping skills. So slowly move on to the what you call mental health aspect in disaster management. So one of the thing is intervention part. When you talk about the mental health, because we have to balance the mental health, as we really seen how it leads to depression, anxiety, irritability and all in the during that time. Now how to manage that, that is more important. So mental health is equally important as physical health. Of late mental health is getting a lot of importance. Earlier people are not giving much of importance to mental health, but of late psychology works, where you can see the mental health experts or the article psychology experts are working in different settings. For example, it may be in schools, it may be in industries, it may be in colleges, it may be in different settings where mental health is what you call taken care and considered as very serious aspect of one's human's life, not only just physical health. So what is the importance of early intervention? So this is more important because we say usually in medicine we say prevention is better than cure. So if you start early intervention, I think that is definitely good. uh, there are what you call there could be a distressing event which can have immediate reactions, and that has a lot of meaning for event to a person. But when you talk about meaning of event to a person, traditional mental health interventions are addressing what people tell themselves for the rest of their lives, that this has happened, which is meaning to the event to the person. Because many times people will have flashback, when I was young, this has happened. They will not forget even till the what you call their old age. That must, it maybe they're still in their minds. So once you do what you call immediate what you call start what you call early interventions, they can mitigate needs for long-term care by addressing immediate reactions to the distressing event. So that's where one can find some kind of solution if early intervention is began rather than later intervention. So that's not a good idea. So automatically I'll skip this because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how we try to self-actualize from basic needs to self-actualization. Uh, the first thing is, suppose you are in a position to help others. What are the attributes you should have, and what are the skills you should possess to assist the what you call survivors, or the where people are affected and still they are survived? So first thing is what are the traits or characteristics you should possess to deal with them? The first thing is good listening skills. That is more important because they need somebody to listen to them. And many times we forget that we just want to repair the physical considerations like physical infrastructure rather than psychological infrastructure, where a lot of people just ignore it, including the state government policies too. So I don't think when for example, where our nearest district was affected like Kur, I don't know how many psychologists went there and counseled them. I think it was all the time managing, rebuilding the issues, uh, restructuring the things, building the roads, and everything like that. But how many people really went for rebuilding the minds? I don't know. So, but they want somebody to listen to them. So, if you are in a position, I think you should have a good listening skills because they want somebody to listen. Then, since many times they don't open up in a short while, you require a lot of patience to listen to them because that's one of the counselor's characteristics too. So one has to listen with the patience, and it's not just patience and you're not doing as a routine job. You should have a caring attitude and a kind of sympathy and empathy. If you show, definitely they get a lot of relief psychologically. Then trustworthiness, because many times they will have a lot of things to tell, but the way your reaction might bring them a doubt that there is no use in telling with this person. That means entire ideology of helping others from your side is going to be a futile exercise, because if they lose a trust in you, that means you are not able to do anything. So that's the idea. So you have to have a very good what you call trustworthiness with them, or trust building skills, where with the trust building skills you can manage a lot. Then being approachable and culturally sensitive. Why? Because whenever somebody is in need, I think you should be able to help them out. And culturally sensitive, because we live in a multicultural society, and once we live in a multicultural society, depending upon the cultural aspect or background of a particular culture, we have to manage the show. Otherwise you cannot have a uniform level of assistance, because that might be what you call understood or misunderstood differently by others. So you have to be careful. And then another thing is, one has to be non-judgmental. That is also more important. Why? Because the moment there is a what you call partiality happens in assisting others, that means there could be a selfishness or there could be an intention behind to help. But that should not happen in a disaster management of psychological issues. So first of all, you should be non-judgmental, in the sense, don't consider any religion, gender, creed, caste while assisting. The moment you start thinking that gender, caste, religion, creed and all, then that means you are being judgmental. I request you not to be into that, because being judgmental is not a good idea. So better you be a non-judgmental person while assisting the survivors. Then flexible and tolerant of chaos. Many times what happens is, you have to be flexible and tolerant of chaos, because a lot of disruption should happen. And imagine a survivor, his condition, he has lost so many things. He is into what you call problematic issues. He may not be having what you call a good place to live and good food to eat. And imagine such cases, the chavas can, and they may live in camps, like different camps with a minimal food. Now one has to manage them. So to manage them, you have to be flexible and tolerant to manage them. And if you are not able to do that, then your assistance may not be very effective. So we call it as what you call, when planning that, we usually refer a word called as psychological first aid. So what is the meaning of a psychological first aid? We know first aid is the immediate what you call treatment in medicine, where a minimal level of treatment is given so that we can later take them to the hospital. So that's why we have first aid boxes at home, in our vehicles, where a minimal level of treatment is given, which is very quick in nature. So in the psychological first aid, we talk about an approach for assisting people in immediate aftermath of disaster. When some disaster has happened, how we can approach, that is more important. So this can be done through what you call designing a specific ways of strategies to reduce the initial distress for children, adolescents, adults and families, because we say to get out of that immediate feelings that we have lost something. So it's the initial distress that people go panicky. It's not anxiety, fear or phobia. People get into panic reactions. They might run, there will be diverse reactions from these people who are affected and the survivors. So their initial distress has to be reduced. Then the psychological first aid starts immediately following the disaster, not waiting for 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 months. The psychological first aid should be immediately after following the disaster. So that is more important. Then what are the core principles when you go for a psychological first aid principles? The first thing itself is a contact and engagement, because that's what usually is done, where the person immediately we have to contact the individual and fix them a time. That is most important. See to that their safety and comfort is more important, because they are already what you call in the insecurity zone, and they are already in a hapless way, or hopelessness is prevailing among them. This can affect their safety and comfort. So being what you call Suresh sir, can you mute your Suresh sir, can you mute your microphone? Yeah. So it can what you call affect their safety and comfort. This one. So fine. Then there could be a stabilization process where being a first being assistance in a first psychological first aid, one can stabilize, where one can cool down or calming the individual. Then now start information gathering. So what is that information gathering is required is the need of the what you call people who are affected or the survivors. So that's where immediate needs and concerns, not the delayed ones. What is the requirement as of now? That is more important. So information gathering. Then the next one will move on to the practical assistance, where how do we exactly help them? So here, since we already identified the needs through information gathering, now we know what they want in their assistance. So immediately we try to what you call offer help with the immediate needs. Now this can be done through connection with the social supports. So when you talk about the connection with the social supports, so it could be gathering people who are what you call close one, and this one getting help from NGOs, and even the neighbors can be useful, because that's what happens many times. When something happens, people go in gangs and go in groups and help the things. It could be NCC, it could be NSS, or it could be any other groups where they go and help, so that some kind of what you call help, where it can reduce the uh, feelings of loss and bereavement can happen. Then information on coping, that's also more important. We have to give what you call information as assistance, where how to manage the situation, that is more important. How to cope with the situation now, because the loss has already happened, the damage is already done. Now how to manage that damage? Now here more of a psychological damage than the physical damage, where people are planning or the psychologists are planning. Then afterwards, when it all happens with that, then one can linkage with the collaborative services, where a link with the what you call continuity services, where you cannot be there all the time, but now you can link with the what you call collaborative services. It could be governmental agencies or it could be non-governmental agencies, where you can link and collaborate with them, so that these people likely to get the continued help from those sources which they found earlier it was not there. So find those agencies, find those collaborative services, link with them, so that in the future also these people can directly contact them. So that's the idea there in psychological first aid. These are the core principles which one has to follow. So as a psychological first aid for first responders, what you can do, the first one itself is the safety part, because people are, as I said, they're highly insecure, and they don't have their what you call basic needs. They don't have to eat, they don't have place to eat, they don't have place to live, they don't have food to eat. Now one has to think of their safety first. In that, we can think of putting a common shelter, giving food to them, and along with that, medical attention also important, because they may be injured. So medical attention also equally this one. Then we have to give them recurrent information. This is more important. What is that information? How to get the basic needs? That is more important, because you cannot be there again, as I said, all the time there working with them, because you are your own job. You are not full-time employed there. So now, as we seen in the previous slide, linking up with the agencies where they can directly connect to the people, and nowadays people are so much of generous, so that they can also help people out. So linking, where giving the accurate and simple information to the survivors is one of the major thing in the safety part. Then calmingness. Okay, so what is this calmingness? The simple thing is just listen to them. They have a lot of things to tell. By way they ventilate themselves, they express their feelings, you believe it or not, they get a lot of relief. And that time you have to be very compassionate, you should be very considerable, you should be friendly, because sometimes they may get angry, but you don't have to get angry, because you are on the other side to help them. So your job is to help them out. That is more important. Then please provide accurate information about disaster, because you have seen nowadays how the information spreads in a very bad way, or in a what you call though even the small scale it has happened, the information will go in a very big way, and as if what you call people are dying not because of the impact, because of the news. Because usually what happened in corona, the way the media highlighted the issues, because earlier they were giving two bulletins. I think all of you remember, afternoon one bulletin and evening one bulletin. How many people survived, how many people discharged, how many people died, and the way the media highlighted the wordings and the music attached to it, it furthermore increased our psychosis, peer psychosis. That is why by doing that, many people got heart attacks. That is also not good thing. So this is where the media had not provided accurate.
Not only that, sir, many people got suicide also, sir.
Yeah. So since there is no accurate information, and nobody knew what kind of relief efforts were there, there are big disasters, because small kind of disasters, as somebody rightly said, yes, suicides, because they didn't know much of information. They think that corona effect, death is guaranteed. Who said no? Many people got affected corona, but they didn't know about it, because their immune system was so strong that they could get rid of it. So that's the idea. Then the next part in promoting connectedness, where one needs to help people contact friends and family, keep families together. This is more important, because the person is already in distress. Person may have lost one of the person or more persons. So keeping them together can be a big way to bring them back to a good mental health. Then the self-efficacy, that what you call, now you try to bring in what you call suggestions, or give them suggestions to help themselves. That is more important. As I said, as a assistance part, you have gone to the spot, but you cannot be there. Now helping themselves, that is more important, where now try to identify their self-efficacy, their own talents, so that they can live themselves without anybody's assistance, so they can manage to get their own needs. That is more important. And in such cases, definitely, even if next time any other disaster comes, they can manage. Then helping part, where as again a kind of repetition comes here, help them to get the nearest resources, where if they are in troubles, how to get those resources fast to the get the things in no time. So all these things can, what you call, promoted through psychological first aid. So being a person, you can do that. Then another important thing, because sometimes we have got extra curiosity, but as a psychological first aid worker, for first responders, there are some tips for you what you should not do. The first thing is, don't force people to share their stories with you unless they tell you, because that might be a nightmare for them. The flashback can have a lot of negative impact. Don't force people, that is more important. Then don't just give an assurance that I'll do this, everything will be fine. Can you do that? The moment you start doing that, people might believe, and when you don't do that, I think you will be under trouble. Then don't tell people why you think they were suffered, because think that okay, this should have happened to you. No, already they are in distress. And please don't make any promises that you cannot able to manage or maintain, because promises are meant to be followed and to be done, not to be broken. So do not make promises that can, what you call, that you cannot manage by yourself. Then do not criticize existing services or relief efforts in front of people who are getting it. This might get a negativity among them. People are doing some kind of services, some kind of relief efforts are going on. Don't criticize them in front of those survivors. This will have negative impact, because people may not believe. So it has so much so happened. Sometimes whenever the relief team went, they were beaten up back. I don't know, there's some instance it happened. People didn't take the relief services. In fact, the relief people got beatings from others and they had to run away back, though they wanted to help others. Why? Because that was the criticism or the comments given by others which has impacted. Then after psychological first aid, uh, managing intense emotions, survive, because since there's a limited time, I didn't want to show any videos how they emotionally react. So there could be intense emotions occurring or happening in the person, but as a first psychological first aid worker, you have to manage it. So one thing is communicate calmly. Whatever the severity, you have to slowly tell them, because you cannot hide the things. One or other day you have to tell them. So the communication should be in a very calm condition. You don't be involved in that kind of sentiments. That is again not a good idea. Then communicate in a warm condition. That is more important. Think what the idea here is, while communicating, the feeling that other person should get that also, you're also seriously concerned about it. That's what I call warm communication, where you're also, it's not just a passive communication, where you're also involved deeply into this issue. So that's where you're communicating. Then establishing a good relationship, that being a helper, okay, they should think that they can trust you, so that they can get a good, very good help. In turn, you can get what you call a lot of information which is happening at the ground, or you can get a lot of information and the ground reality issues. Then please use concrete questions to help person focus, because don't beat around the bush, because this is also not good. Then come to agreement about something, that is more important, because you have to manage. You cannot keep the things in abeyance, like okay, it cannot be done or it cannot be done. So you have to come to agreement, you have to make a compromise, you have to bring a balance. Then the people are already suffered, please speak to them with some respect, because they are hopeless, they are having depression. You cannot use their your own language. So please use the respect, because there are already lost things. Then sometimes what happens is, people are so down that they are not able to communicate, they're not able to respond. Immediately ask for some kind of assistance. That is more important, because one is if they're not communicating fine, but if they're becoming aggressive or threatening, that time also you require a protection. So require, seek immediate attention. That is more important. Then making referrals. Okay, many times we say refer. What is the meaning of referrals? So when I find it difficult to handle a situation, so I might find another person who can handle better. That is more important. So since I am not able to manage the things well, I should not tell, okay, I'll do. Usually the doctors do that in the sense when a doctor says, okay, this I cannot do. So can you go to the other hospital and or a big hospital and get the operation done, which the facilities I don't have, or I don't have expertise. The same thing here is psychological expertise, where the person thinks that he's not able to manage the show well. I think he can always refer it. Now, the reference will come in the consultation with the higher officials, so that your institution or your own thing cannot be managed well. So better you can go for uh, higher levels of referrals with the more expertise. Then when one has to make referrals, that is also more important. When you might get a doubt that people or individual might give a hint that the person might commit suicide, or is openly telling, if this is not happening, I'm going to commit suicide. Or there could be child abuse or any criminal activity, because many times it happens. I still remember when a flight accident occurred in flight disaster happened in Mangalore. Some people, that is a Dubai Mangalore flight. Uh, people went and snatched gold and all from the individuals, from the dead bodies, rather than helping them out. And how many of you remember? This is a kind of criminal activity which is being done during disasters. I think in such cases, definitely referral activities are important. Whenever a person seems to be socially isolated, definitely, because that again giving idea of suicide or loneliness. Then there could be imaginary ideas or feelings of persecution, that person might get punished. Better give a referral. Then, as I said, when it's not beyond our own capacity to manage the show, better go for the higher person or refer person to others. Then when a person engages in the risky or threatening behavior, when you are not able to manage, better you refer. Then another important thing is, whenever the people talk about the threats, or whenever people gives the clues, please understand that there is something is going to be negative. People just can't speak just like that. They can't just play with the their emotions. So immediately you have to talk to the higher authorities and or the person in charge and manage the show better. So this is where the referrals are very important. Then another important thing is confidentiality maintenance, or maintaining confidentiality. Now, when you talk about maintaining confidentiality, the more you maintain the confidentiality of a person, it builds a trust and the respect. That is more important. So the more you open up a person's issues with other individual, next time you cannot get any referral. That's the idea. So confidentiality should be maintained in a psychological first aid, because the symptoms could be very different. Then whatever you have discussed or should be maintained very private and confidential, not to disclose with others or not even discuss others, because the moment you start disclosing others and discussing others and the other person comes to know about it, that means you are not going to be a good person to counsel them. Then never try to get the personal information or the information which is very private or which is very sensitive or so-called touchy ones should not be poked or asked, because the moment you start asking very personal questions, your own survivor might have a doubt why this person is asking my personal questions rather than disaster related issues. So better not to ask such personal information, but only you can breach the confidentiality whenever you find that the person has an intention to harm others or intention to harm himself. That is also more important. Or the person may be going to commit big negative things. So in such cases, you have all the rights to breach the confidentiality, but otherwise, please maintain the confidentiality. That is more important. Then this is where I'm going to stop here. We have got another 5 minutes. So if there is any what you call suggestions or any clarifications required where mental health as a aspect important for disaster management apart from financial management or social or environmental damages, so feel free to discuss or ask. We have got another 5 minutes to discuss.
Dear participants, if you have any queries, please go ahead. If there are no queries, please propose vote of thanks to Professor Lancy Souza.
Sir, no questions?
Dear participants, please respond. Otherwise, please propose vote of thanks.
Sir, can you audible, sir?
Yes, Jayprasad, please go ahead.
Sir, Lancy, sir, can you audible, sir?
Yeah. Please feel free to ask.
No. Just should we go for proposed vote of thanks? Sir?
Okay. I thought you are having a question.
It's my great privilege to propose a vote of thanks, sir. Really wonderful presentations about the psychology in the disaster management, sir. On behalf of the HRDC director, coordinator, on behalf of all the participants, thank you very much, sir. Your remarkable presentation, Lancy, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lancy, sir.
Okay, sir.
Sir, yes,
sir, I can exit now.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Log out of this. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Dear participants,